and support system, to Mr. Ronald Clark, its president, and all its offices. Thanks also to Mr. Martin Luther King. We must, first of all, in order to simply a list of dates and tales about kings and queens long past gone, and that it does not really reflect on them or mean anything to them. But history is a very real thing, a very human thing. We bring it into being with what we do and do not do. And what we must do is understand history so that it does not happen behind our backs, but in fact we can benefit from it. Indeed, it is an Afrocentric contention that we study history not to escape, not for therapy. We study history for four fundamental reasons. First, we study it to learn its lessons. And it is Malcolm X, one of the subjects for tonight, who said of all our studies, history is best prepared to reward our research. Second, we study it to absorb its spirit of human possibility. And certainly Marcus Garvey understood that when he said, what humans have done, humans can do. So we absorb that sense of human possibility in studying our history. And third, we study it to emulate models of human achievement, to study the life of Sojourner Truth, to understand how she carved free space in an unfree world in the Holocaust of enslavement and redefined what it meant to be a woman, challenged the pink playmate type, the set-aside white woman, and argued that to be a woman was something fuller than that. It meant to participate in the acquisition and maintenance of your own freedom. She said, you don't have to open the door for me. Why give me minor privileges and deny me major rights? So we see this emulation. We see it in Martin Luther King, the gentle soldier, who went to war but would have done other things. People hadn't given him the chance. Finally, we study history. Certainly, this is appropriate this evening. We study history in order to honor the moral obligation to remember. It is Fannie Lou Hamer who said there are two things we should care about: never to forget where we came from, and always praise the bridges that carried us over. And so certainly in raising the name of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, we are in fact praising the bridges that carried us over. As Ossie Davis said at Malcolm's funeral, in honoring him, we honor the best in ourselves. Because when we honor the best among us, it is in fact honoring the best in ourselves. And so we come to honor as well as discuss Martin Luther King and Malcolm X for what they have given us. If we're going to understand their legacy, however, we must put it in context so that they don't stand outside of history, but in the very flow and fullness of history. And when we look at the context in which they acted, we understand that history, again, is a very human thing, that we shape it with our own hands and minds with what we do and do not do. Great because ordinary situation, a challenging situation, because they accepted an invitation to history, the struggle for freedom, for liberation, and a high level of human life, and honored that invitation. This time was a turning point for black people. They came into being in the 60s, and the 60s was a time of turning and upheaval. It was a struggle against oppression, a time which gave rise to great issues, great struggles, and great men and women to respond to them and inspire and challenge the people to dare greatness, to dare freedom. It is a situation in the 60s pregnant with possibilities of freedom, justice, and self and social construction. Because in the process of constructing society, one at the same time constructs oneself. What has made us what we are as African people in this country is that we have acted in history, that we have taken control of our destiny and daily lives and a situation and begun to shape them in our own image and interest. And in shaping this situation, we in fact shape ourselves, identify ourselves, affirm ourselves, and speak our special truth to the world. Context is also one of being heirs and custodians of a great legacy and tradition. Malcolm and Martin did not just fall from the sky. They grew from a certain context, a legacy and tradition of spiritual, ethical, and intellectual and political achievement, grounded in and informed by an ongoing struggle for liberation and higher levels of human life. This tradition is first informed by the most ancient tradition in the world, the African tradition. The most ancient intellectual and ethical tradition, the Nile Valley tradition of ancient Egyptian, summed up in the moral imperative posed in the book of Coming Forth by Day, that we must all bear witness to truth and set the scales of justice in their proper place. A tradition that taught concern and responsibility for the most vulnerable among us, saying, give food to the hungry, water to the thirsty, clothes to the naked, and abode to those without one. Be care for the sick, a staff of support for those of old age. Be a father to the orphan, a husband to the widow, and a ladder for those trapped in the pit of despair. It's that tradition that Malcolm and Martin comes out, that African people come out of, and it is that tradition that is called upon in the 60s. It is also out of the tradition more modern, which is a continuation of the ancient, the tradition of Nat Turner, of Gabriel and Nana Prosser, of Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, and Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, and Alexander Cromwell, and W.B. Du Bois, and Mary McLeod Bethune. It's a tradition of setting the moral and progressive agenda in this country, daring to be the moral conscience of America, daring to be its moral vanguard, which is constantly engaged in political practice, informed and inspired by ethical aspirations for a just and good society and a context for maximum human flourishing. And it is important here to understand that both King's message and Malcolm's message are both particular and universal. And this is a very important thing because a lot of times people tell black people that if they talk a particular way, they're not speaking to other humans. But all great messages, even though they come into being from among a definite people, in fact, if they are great, speak to the whole of humanity. African Americans feel that they are the tendency is to reach out. We institute on ourselves that we, in fact, must be against all forms of oppression, not just racism, but classism, sexism, ageism, all the isms that constrain human freedom and minimize human flourishing. If the Holocaust taught us anything, it should teach us that. And that's a heavy burden to bear. It's a heavy honor to bear. Because as Mary McLeod Bethune said, we are heirs and custodians of a great legacy, And we must bear the burden and glory of that legacy with strength, dignity, and determination. Am I all I, who am I? Who am I? Am I really who I am? And am I all I ought to be? Are you all you ought to be? And are you really who you are? Fanon said we wear the mask. They force us into masks. And sometimes we can't recognize ourselves. But we are morally obligated to be all we ought to be. I had said that Malcolm said the religion has to be, and King has to be social as well as spiritual. Malcolm taught that there were two kinds of, two traditions in religion, essentially one that was liberational and one that was salvational. This is divided by his contemporary and colleague Jaramogi Abebe Ajiman, the holy patriarch of the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Jaramogi said salvation is personal and abstract, but liberation is collective and practical. Given this interestedness, Malcolm's theology is shaped. His concept of religion is shaped in the context of practice, the struggle for liberation itself. His point of departure then is not biblical or Quranic texts from which he draws, but the social context in which he lives, teaches, works, and in which his people have historically evolved. And therefore he joins King in saying a religion that does not speak to our concern for liberation and a high level of human life is not a serious religion. You see, King and Malcolm are right, because if a religion just teaches you to fly away and haven't taught you to make arrangements to fly, you got a problem. People can keep saying that the world is coming to an end, but when a preacher preaches that and then buys a house with a 40-year mortgage, you know that's a problem. Another contention that King and Malcolm makes is that struggle is a source of growth and change. Struggle is key to growth and change. This is like a foreign doctrine in 1994 with most people. You're not supposed to struggle for change. You're supposed to close your eyes, hope something don't happen you can't handle. Try to finish your work. Malcolm said you have to struggle for it. King said you have to struggle for it. You can hope for change, but in the final analysis, as I've said so many times, practice proves everything. The struggle must be for a new world and a new man and woman to inhabit it. King said, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. History shows that every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. Is King correct? Of course he is. Is Malcolm correct? Of course he is. Struggle is the most characteristic aspect of the human personality. We struggle to come into being. That's called birth. We struggle to make the most out of our being. That's called life. And we struggle not to go out of being. That's called the quest for immortality. So struggle is central to our development. We struggle on every level of life. And the question we must raise ourselves is, what are we struggling for that's important? King said, people who have nothing in their life that they're willing to die for don't have a life worth living. And Malcolm said, the ultimate price to pay for living the life you want is to be willing to die to achieve it. King taught you must do this by nonviolent means. And this is where they conflict here. They conflict not so much in extremes, but they conflict in terms of how they conceive who they are fighting against and what is necessary to achieve it. King argues against violence for several reasons. He argues it, first of all, is immoral and impractical. He said it's impractical because it's a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. The old law, he says, of an eye for an eye leaves everybody. It's immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than win his understanding. It seeks to annihilate rather than confer. Now, King said, and it's a strong moral argument, that when you engage in struggle, you must so struggle that you win partners rather than leave victims. That's a good context. Now listen to this. Struggle in such a way that you win partners or allies rather than leave victims. In a moral context, you know that's strong. You should practice it certainly with man and woman relationships. Is that fair to say? You should struggle like that with your friends. But how do you do that with an enemy? King says, regardless of the inhumanity that people have shown toward us, we must take the moral high ground and not stoop to their level. Now, Malcolm says, well, King, there are some problems here. And the first problem is that you're assuming a moral posture for an immoral and amoral group of people. That in fact, Bull Connor was a symbol of white Southern racism. He's the guy that turned the hoses on little children, high-powered hoses that strip bark off trees. He set dogs on women and beat them on their breasts and between their legs, and beat the men between their legs, and forced other prisoners that they captured to beat each other, and then wet the people with the water and put electric cattle prods to them. So King said, well, hey, you know what? The guy just got some problems. Beneath all of it, he's human. Malcolm said, I can't afford to wait to see his humanity come out. That it is in fact dangerous to do that. That it is in fact immoral to let immoral people assault you and you not respond in the same way. Malcolm said, you have to act in such a way that people don't lose respect for you because you don't do for yourself what other people do for themselves. He said to the white man, I'm the man you think you are. If you want to know what I do for my freedom,